The House has sent us House Bill 4083, the Clean Oregon Assets Legislation, or COAL Act, and I ask the support of my colleagues to make it law. First, I'd like to publicly thank Representative Con Pham and Treasurer Tobias Read for working together on several rounds of drafting this bill, and thank the many legislative sponsors and the over 100 community organizations and public sector unions in support. The bill directs the Treasury to align their investments with the legislature's phase-out of coal that began 8 years ago. The COAL Act will begin to align our public pension investments with our existing climate commitments and the global trend of coal phase-out by moving nearly $1 billion of Oregon State Treasury funds out of publicly traded coal company stocks. The COAL Act does not mandate divestment in amalgamated private equity funds that may also include coal. And to be clear, the COAL Act only addresses thermal coal, not the coal that's used for burning. That is the coal used for to make power. It does not include the higher grade material that's used to make steel. This bill will do what California's SB 185 did, that passed in 2015. It saved some $600 million for CalPERS since the bill was enacted. Coal investments are poor investments now, and analysts broadly say it will constitute stranded assets in the near future as cheaper and cleaner energy sources come online. The COAL Act makes it 100% clear that the Treasurer maintains fiduciary duty while signaling our legislative directive that the Treasury phase out investments in publicly traded thermal coal companies, not take on new coal investments, and report to the legislature on the phase out of coal. The measure is an immediate step forward to align our investments with our climate policy while reaffirming the Treasury's fiduciary duty to protect the pensions of more than 400,000 Oregonians. That's why this bill has so many supporters. It makes climate sense, financial sense, and common sense. All the teachers' unions in Oregon, OEA, AFT Oregon, AAUP Oregon, which include tens of thousands of PERS members, support this legislation. These supporters don't want their retirement investments endangered by investments in a bygone industry. Colleagues, you've heard proposals in several sessions for reducing fossil fuel investment by our state treasury, and you've probably heard Treasurer Read's concerns with those earlier bills. There have been important questions about separation of legislative and executive powers and about the Treasurer's fiduciary duties. Those are good and important questions, and they are part of a very robust national conversation. I would like to take a minute to thank Treasurer Read for producing this report, which you may have seen recently. It's titled A Pathway to Net Zero, Positioning the Oregon Public Employees Retirement Fund for a Net Zero Carbon Future. I want to read just a couple sentences from the introduction, if I may, Mr. President.
Without objection.
This is good reading. I hope you do take some time with it. In the introduction, Treasurer Read writes, "Moving forward on what's included in this plan will require a lot, and there will be trade-offs for sure, but the cost of doing nothing is even higher. And while we've already taken some meaningful steps within our portfolio, such as more than doubling the amount we have invested in renewable energy while I've been treasurer, we must increase the pace and urgency of reducing our exposure to fossil fuels." I also want to thank the Treasurer for his testimony on this bill in committee. Just a couple excerpts from that, if I may. The issue, this is our Treasurer's words, "The issue of climate change broadly is an urgent risk to the investment returns of the Oregon Public Employee Retirement Fund. Our fiduciary duty is a constant. It obligates us to be loyal to the beneficiaries all the time. Having said all of that, I have conveyed to the proponents of the legislation there are appropriate ways for the legislature to provide direction to the Investment Council and to Treasury. The legislature has done this in the past 2 different times, and House Bill 4083, the bill we are discussing today, takes a similar approach. Lastly, he expressed sincere appreciation to Rep. Pham and her team and says, "I've appreciated the work with legislators to craft a plan that is responsive to the concerns we have and our needs to implement a plan that works for beneficiaries. This legislation before you has definitely benefited from that willingness and that exchange." Colleagues, please join me in support of House Bill 4083. Thank you.
Discussion. Recognize Senator Fred Gerard.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I really rise in opposition to this. First of all, this is a fiduciary responsibility of the treasurer. The treasurer is to do the best he can with the money that he has. Now, we have an unfunded liability in our PERS fund, and it's predicated on the fact that we can make 8% per year on that liability. So the unfunded liability is really understated because, for example, this year we made 5%. So you start putting restrictions on them, they start having problems. And I'd like to remind this body, we put a restriction on them that they had to divest, and I'm sure I voted for it, Russian holdings. Well, they still haven't divested, and the reason is nobody wants to buy it, and the value of those holdings plummeted. So what we're asking them to do is be financially irresponsible, not financially responsible. Don't tie their hands telling them how to invest their money. That's just plain wrong, and it goes against the term fiduciary responsibility. We don't know diddly how to invest money in this building, and to sit there and tell them that they can't invest in any commodity or any investment whatsoever is just plain wrong, and it's going to bite us in the derriere. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion. Seeing none, Senator Golden, your closing.
Yes, thanks, Mr. President. I just have a thought or two about the thoughts we just heard. There seems to be a presumption, and you know, this is a really intense national conversation. This is really going on in just about every state capital in one form or another. But there is a presumption when you have a restriction like this, we're not going to buy new coal, you're going to lose money. And the analysis and studies of so many funds, fossil-free funds, disprove that. Or let me say, disprove may be strong, cast that notion into very strong doubt. The larger point I would say is this bill does not say that the Treasurer and the Treasury may not make these investments. It is a strong advisory to divest, to reduce the thermal coal portfolio fairly promptly, and not to buy new coal. It does not bind their hands. We would be on record with that strong advisory statement. And I think the proof that proper fiduciary lines are being observed here is the testimony of the Treasurer, which I won't read again, but actually I won't read it all again, Mr. President, but I will read just one thing that I read a few minutes ago. Our fiduciary duty is a constant, the words the Treasurer read. Our fiduciary duty is a constant. It obligates us to be loyal to the beneficiary all the time. Having said all of that, I have conveyed to the proponents of the legislation there are appropriate ways for the legislature to provide direction to the Investment Council and to Treasury. And the legislature has done this in the past 2 different times, and this bill, HB 4083, takes a similar approach. Again, Treasurer made an effort to express his comfort, his feelings about the appropriateness of this legislation. I thank him for that and would greatly support or appreciate the support of my colleagues for this bill. Thank you.